My billionaire mother-in-law walked into my hospital room, flanked by my husband's smirking mistress and a team of lawyers. She tossed a set of divorce papers on my lap and said, "Take $22 million and sign it. I only want the kids. A lowborn girl like you doesn't belong in our family legacy anyway." She thought her massive fortune could buy anything, even my own flesh and blood. Everyone in that room expected me to scream, cry, or beg. Instead, I picked up the pen, quietly smiled, signed the papers, and disappeared into the night with my babies. They thought they had won a complete victory. But what my greedy mother-in-law didn't know was that by signing that specific document, she had just triggered a hidden clause that would systematically balance her entire multi-million-dollar fortune down to absolute zero. The heavy silence of the hospital room was broken only by the steady, rhythmic beep of my heart monitor. My name is Amber. I am 27 years old, and just 3 days ago, I underwent an exhausting labor to bring my beautiful twin babies into this world. I was still running on pure exhaustion, desperately trying to process the overwhelming love of becoming a mother, when the door swung open. My billionaire mother-in-law, Eleanor, glided into the room with the terrifying grace of a predator. She didn't look at me. Her cold eyes went straight to the 2 plastic bassinets near the window. Behind her walked my husband, Christian, looking down at his expensive leather shoes in silent, cowardly submission. And right beside him, holding his arm, was his mistress, Vanessa, wearing a smug, mocking grin that told me she had already won. Eleanor didn't offer a single word of congratulations. Instead, she stepped up to my bedside, took a thick manila folder from her lead corporate attorney, and dropped it right onto my lap. She looked down at me with absolute disdain, treating me like a minor inconvenience to be cleared away. "Take $22 million and sign it," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with venom. "I only want the kids. A lowborn girl like you doesn't belong in our family legacy anyway." Before I tell you what happened next, I have a quick question for you. What kind of the city or country you're watching from right now? I love seeing exactly how far my story of justice has reached. Vanessa smirked, expecting me to break down. They all thought a 27-year-old girl from a humble background would collapse under the pressure of a billionaire family. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I looked Eleanor straight in her cold, gray eyes, picked up the sleek silver pen, and calmly signed my name on the dotted line. I smiled gently at their pale, confused attorney, leaned back against my pillows, and watched them celebrate what they thought was a complete victory. They had absolutely no idea they had just walked into a financial trap. To understand how a billionaire family ended up in a sterile hospital room trying to buy my biological children, you have to understand the 5 years of psychological warfare I endured. From the moment Christian introduced me to his family, Eleanor made it her life's mission to remind me that I was nothing. I was a scholarship kid, a corporate forensic accountant who grew up in a working-class neighborhood, while her family supposedly traced their wealth back generations. Every family dinner was a masterclass in passive aggression. Eleanor bloodline, or make fun of my affordable wardrobe in front of her high society friends. Christian, completely dominated by his mother's wealth and overbearing personality, never once stood up for me. He simply sat there, a silent accomplice to my humiliation. But working as a forensic accountant teaches you to look past the glitz and glamour to see the cold, hard numbers beneath. And the numbers in Eleanor's empire didn't add up. Eleanor carried herself with the supreme arrogance of a self-made tech tycoon, but the truth was far more embarrassing. Her massive billionaire empire wasn't actually built by her brilliant business mind. It relied entirely on a complex, fragile web of family trusts and corporate structures. Those structures were originally set up by Christian's late father, Arthur, a brilliant investor who deeply mistrusted Eleanor's reckless spending habits and superficial lifestyle. Before he passed away, he locked the family wealth behind ironclad legal barriers to protect it from his own wife's incompetence, leaving a ticking financial time bomb that Eleanor completely ignored. The cracks in my marriage turned into a canyon just a few weeks before I went into labor. I started noticing Christian hiding his phone, taking late-night business calls in the garage, and smelling of a perfume I certainly didn't wear. It didn't take long for my forensic training to kick in. While Christian drove to look for digital evidence of his affair, I found the explicit messages and hotel receipts, proving he was sleeping with a high society mistress handpicked by his mother. But as I kept digging through the encrypted folders, my eyes fell on something far more explosive: the original, unedited legal documents of Arthur's family trust. Eleanor and Christian's lawyers had spent years trying to bury the specific terms of that trust, but they couldn't delete them from the master archive. As I read through the dense legal jargon, my breath hitched. Arthur had anticipated exactly what kind of people his wife and son would become. Tucked deep inside the corporate bylaws was an ironclad, unalterable morality and lineage clause. The rule was absolute. If Christian ever divorced his wife after the birth of biological heirs in order to marry a mistress, or if Eleanor used her corporate power to force a marital separation to alienate the biological mother from her children, it would trigger an immediate emergency asset liquidation. The entire multi-million-dollar trust would automatically dissolve, bypassing Christian and Eleanor completely. Every single dollar, stock, and property deed would instantly transfer into a private, protected asset foundation controlled solely by the mother of those heirs. Me. I sat in the dark that night, looking at my pregnant belly, and realized my mother-in-law's ultimate act of greed would be her own undoing. Returning to that tense hospital room, the air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Eleanor stood tall, radiating a smug aura of absolute triumph, while Christian looked on with pathetic relief. The moment the wet ink of my signature dried on those papers, they genuinely believed they had successfully bought my flesh and blood for $22 million. They thought they had entirely broken me. Eleanor casually gestured to her legal team, signaled for Christian and his grinning mistress to follow, and strutted out of the room to arrange what she thought was an immediate custody transfer. But they drastically underestimated who they were dealing with. The very second the door clicked shut, my quiet smile turned into a focused, calculated expression. I didn't waste a single moment. Using a burner phone, I contacted my prearranged trusted inner circle and a private medical transport team I had secretly hired days before. Under the absolute cover of a dark midnight, while the hospital staff was changing shifts, I quietly discharged myself and wrapped my precious newborn twins securely in my arms. We slipped out through a private service exit into a waiting vehicle, completely vanishing into the night without leaving a single paper trail for Eleanor's high-priced security team to track. And on the empty bedside table, sitting right under the dim hospital light, I intentionally left behind the physical $22 million check Eleanor had tossed at me. I didn't need a single cent of her dirty money, because I knew that by morning, a catastrophic financial storm was going to completely erase her entire existence. The next morning, the bright California sun streamed through the windows of the hospital, casting a cheerful light over a scene that was about to turn into an absolute nightmare for the Sterling family. At exactly 8 o'clock, Eleanor strutted down the hallway toward the maternity ward, flanked by Christian and his smug mistress. Eleanor was already wearing an expensive designer outfit, ready to take her new trophies, my twins, back to her grand estate. They proudly walked into the private room, expecting to find a broken, weeping girl. Instead, they were greeted by absolute emptiness. The bed was neatly stripped, the bassinets were completely vacant, and the only thing left behind was that untouched $22 million check resting on the side table. Eleanor's face twisted in immediate rage. She pulled out her phone, screaming at her head of security to find me, assuming I had simply panicked and run away with the babies. But as she was yelling, her lead corporate attorney stepped into the room, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. As Eleanor looked at him, she noticed the man was visibly trembling. His face had turned completely pale, and sweat was actively breaking out across his forehead. He slowly lowered his phone, looked at Eleanor with pure terror in his eyes, and whispered that they had just made a catastrophic mistake. By presenting me with those specific divorce papers and forcing a separation to alienate me from my newborns, they had officially executed the separation on the grounds of maternal alienation. They hadn't trapped me. They had walked directly into the ironclad morality trap. Arthur's hidden liquidation clause had just been officially triggered, and the gears of financial destruction were already turning. The corporate collapse that followed was nothing short of a financial tsunami. Eleanor didn't even have time to process her attorney's words before her phone began buzzing violently with emergency alerts from her executive banking teams. Within minutes, the automated systems of the family trust executed Arthur's ironclad protocols. By noon, Eleanor's high-limit corporate credit cards were declined, and her primary liquid asset bank accounts were completely frozen by legal executors. The luxury real estate properties, including her beloved mega mansion and the family's downtown office high-rise, were instantly placed under corporate receivership, prevents a forensic accountant. I had spent the previous week preparing every single dollar, stock portfolio, and commercial asset began systematically transferring into my newly established, legally protected asset foundation. Eleanor and Christian watched helplessly in real time as their digital dashboard balances aggressively ticked downward, rapidly balancing their massive multi-million-dollar fortune all the way down to absolute zero. By mid-afternoon, personal creditors and high-end lenders caught wind of the trust's sudden liquidation and immediately descended upon them. They demanded instant repayment for the millions in unpaid personal loans Eleanor had taken out to fund their lavish lifestyle. Christian and his mistress were left completely penniless, kicked out of their penthouse by the building's management within 48 hours. Eleanor's aggressive, arrogant attempt to treat my biological newborns like a commodity to be purchased had completely and permanently dismantled her entire financial existence, leaving her with absolutely nothing but the clothes on her back. 3 months have passed since that chaotic morning, and my life looks completely unrecognizable. Today, I am living peacefully in a secure, breathtakingly beautiful coastal town, watching the gentle Pacific waves roll in from the front porch of my new home. My beautiful twin babies are thriving, surrounded by nothing but unconditional love, safety, and a bright future. As the sole director of the newly funded Asset Foundation, I am independently wealthy, completely free of my toxic in-laws, and fully capable of providing my children with every opportunity life has to offer. The poetic justice of how everything turned out still brings a quiet smile to my face. The moment the money completely ran out, Christian's high society mistress packed her designer bags and abandoned him, proving her hollow devotion was only ever about the family bank accounts. Christian is now financially ruined, desperately trying to find entry-level work to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Eleanor is facing severe, ongoing legal investigations for years of hidden corporate mismanagement and unauthorized asset transfers that my forensic foundation brought to light. Her empire of borrowed arrogance has vanished into thin air. If you were standing in my shoes in that hospital room, what would you have done? Would you have walked away and left them with absolute zero, or would you have shown them mercy and given them a second chance? Let me know your thoughts and make sure to check out the 2 other stories appearing right now. Twists will definitely surprise you. Thank you so